On the 35th floor of a gleaming glass tower in downtown Chicago, CEO Nathan Hale, the founder of the retail chain Hearth and Hallow, sat in front of a cold cup of coffee, staring at the freshly printed quarterly revenue report. The numbers looked good, very good. Sales were up 7.3%. Customer return rates were steady. Employee satisfaction was rated above average. But there was one thing that kept him restless. Why did everything seem so smooth? He had started this company through sleepless nights in a stockroom, personally sticking price tags and hauling boxes onto shelves, and he knew retail was never this calm, not unless something was being hidden. Back when he was a poor college student working part-time in a rural store, Nathan had made a vow to himself: if I ever become a boss, I'll never forget what it feels like to be treated as invisible. Now, as the head of an empire with over 300 stores, he began to fear that he might have forgotten. And so, one Tuesday morning, with no announcement, no advisors, no entourage, Nathan put on an old jacket, pulled a baseball cap over his head, and walked into store branch number 042 in the suburbs of Denver as just another customer. No one recognized him. There were no welcoming applause. No managers rushing out to greet him with a bow, just the dull ding of the automatic door and the faint smell of watered-down coffee from the cafe stand at the end of the aisle. But within 15 minutes, Nathan knew for sure what was breaking down wasn't sales. It was spirit. One employee ignored a waiting customer. Another sat scrolling through a phone right behind the service counter. Tired eyes, curt answers, forced smiles. This wasn't the Hearth and Hallow he had built. And then he met a man named Hank restocking shelves, the back of his shirt soaked with sweat, yet still smiling when Nathan asked for directions to the kitchenware section. In just a few minutes of conversation, Nathan realized within a system slowly fading piece by piece, there were still small lights quietly holding it all together. He walked out of the store that day without buying a thing. But what he brought back was a lesson and a decision. Because sometimes, to save an empire, you don't need more consultants. You need to return to where it all began and see with your own eyes. Nathan Hale wasn't born to be a boss. His childhood was shaped by the brutal winters of Indiana, where his mother worked at a grocery store and his father drove an interstate truck. They never talked about dreams, only about the power bill, milk money, and how many extra shifts they could take. The first time Nathan learned what retail meant, he was 14, quietly rearranging the bread shelf at the local supermarket because he noticed the manager didn't care to. No one said thank you. No one noticed. But inside Nathan, there was a quiet joy, a sense of making things better, tidier, easier to understand. After graduating with a degree in business administration, funded by scholarships and rotating part-time jobs, Nathan didn't choose to join a major corporation. Instead, he used his entire savings to open a small store called Hearth and Hallow, specializing in simple, affordable household items with aesthetic appeal. His first customer was a single mother who bought an electric kettle and left a note. "Thank you. This is the first time I've found something both beautiful and affordable." From that day forward, he wrote the store's first slogan, "Make ordinary life extraordinary. The first store didn't succeed because of advertising, but because of people like he once was hard-working employees, demanding but sincere customers. Just like that, he opened a second store, then a third, and by year 7, Hearth and Hallow had expanded to 14 states and become a new phenomenon in American retail. But the price of growth was distance. When the number of stores exceeded 300, Nathan had to devote more time to the board of directors, investors, and expansion plans, and less to being on the ground. He began to rely on reports polished, color-coded, and compressed into performance metrics. Customer satisfaction rate, 84%. Positive employee feedback increased by 6.1%. Q2 gross profit exceeded forecast by $2 million. But what he no longer saw were the eyes, the voices, the little things that never showed up on a spreadsheet. Once, Nathan asked the head of HR why there were no long-term employees on the promotion list. The answer was simply, because they don't have the proper certification. But Nathan knew proper certification could never replace a devoted heart. And that was when he began to wonder, was he now running an empire by numbers, but had unknowingly lost the people within it? The secret visit to branch number 042 wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a promise he had once sworn to keep. If one day I'm in charge, I won't let anyone feel invisible. That day, there was no assistant by his side, no cameras. No one in the company knew that the man stepping out of an old grey pickup truck, wearing a faded hoodie and a baseball cap pulled low over his face, was the very founder of it all. Nathan entered Hearth and Hallow's branch number 042, like an ordinary passerby holding a handwritten shopping list scribbled in pencil towels, kitchen knives, light bulbs, face wash. The entrance was fairly clean. A receptionist was busy tapping on her phone, not once looking up. To the right was a display of spring-themed teacup sets. To the left, a modest cafe corner with a few wooden tables. A faint smell of slightly burnt coffee lingered in the air, not terrible, but not inviting either. The first thing that made Nathan stop was a crooked sign that had fallen from a shelf, and no one picked it up for 5 minutes. He walked slowly through the aisles, no filming, no notes, just watching. In the kitchenware section, a middle-aged woman was struggling to find a food storage container. A young employee walked past, AirPods in his ears, and ignored her call for help. Nathan watched the woman sigh and walk away, a moment that seemed minor, but enough to make a customer never return. He continued toward the customer service counter. In theory, this should be the friendliest spot in the store, where every guest is greeted by name, helped with care. But in front of him was an empty desk. 3 customers were standing there, one holding a defective box, another looking around, clearly unsure. No one appeared to be getting help. Nathan got in line, partly to experience it, partly to confirm what he had long feared: how wide had the gap grown between company policy and on-the-ground reality. After 7 minutes, a young man named Kyle emerged from the back, his hair messy, shirt wrinkled, phone in hand, no apology, not even a smile. "What do you want?" Kyle muttered, as if the customers were interrupting his break. Nathan watched. One woman asked to exchange a product, but was refused because her receipt wasn't clear. Another customer asked where the spices were. Kyle pointed vaguely down the hallway without even looking up. When it was Nathan's turn, he gently held up a towel and asked, "Excuse me, could you help me check the price on this?" Kyle didn't look, just said, "There's a scanner in aisle 5. Do it yourself." In that moment, something in Nathan's chest sank, not because he was brushed off, but because he realized this was the Hearth and Hallow experience a customer might get if they showed up on the wrong shift, with the wrong staff, on the wrong day. Nathan offered a faint smile, a smile full of concern. He nodded in thanks, then walked away, towel still in hand but his mind racing. "I once promised I wouldn't let people like this represent my brand," and he knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of the truth. After the brief encounter with Kyle, the person who was supposed to be the face of customer service, Nathan, retreated to the back of the store. He sat down in an empty chair by the cafe corner, ordered a black coffee, and started to observe. There was no longer any doubt this store wasn't running on kindness, it was running on resignation. A customer wandered into the toy section, looked around for help, found none, picked up an item, and then quietly put it back. A young mother holding her child looked lost, unable to find the diapers, and no one approached or offered assistance. And in the middle of it all, Kyle returned to the counter, leaned against a shelf, pulled out his phone like nothing had happened. He plugged one earbud into his left ear, held a drink in his other hand, and propped his foot up on a low stool. Nathan watched the scene, his chest tightening. This was no longer about an inexperienced young employee. This was indifference nurtured and allowed to grow. And in some way, he knew he had helped create the conditions for it. He recalled recent meetings where regional managers spoke of optimizing labor costs, cutting training budgets, and streamlining hiring to accelerate expansion. Back then, he nodded because the numbers looked good, because it meant speed. But now, in front of him stood the result of those choices, an employee hired for being easy to manage, retained because of a low wage, and who was slowly pushing customers away day by day. Nathan wasn't angry. He wasn't blaming anyone, but he knew if left unchecked, Kyles like this would multiply across the entire system. And the more painful truth was, they weren't bad people. Kyle wasn't cruel. He was just someone who had forgotten why he was here. Someone who hadn't been reminded that his work meant something. Someone who had never been inspired to believe he mattered. Nathan wondered, had Kyle ever been properly trained? Had anyone ever listened to him? Or was he simply filling a gap in a weekly schedule? The coffee on Nathan's table was growing cold, much like the spirit of the brand, cooling slowly in the hearts of its people. And then he stood up, not out of anger, but because he needed to keep searching. Because in a system that was cracking, if even one fracture led to light, he had to follow it. I need to know who here is still trying, still in the role of an anonymous customer. Nathan turned into the housewares aisle lined with non-stick pans, kitchen knives, and utensil racks. As he bent down to examine a discounted knife set, he heard the faint clinking of metal, and a warm, steady voice said, "Careful with that one. The edge is a bit sharp. I nicked myself once while stocking it." Looking up, Nathan saw a sturdy-looking middle-aged man in a store uniform. His name tag faded Hank, stock team. Hank wasn't overly friendly. not overly polite, but he had a calm presence, as if he understood that doing a good job didn't require applause. Nathan asked, "How long have you been working here?" Hank smiled and nodded slightly. "Almost 12 years now. Since the store first opened. Back then, it was just me and a young guy, unloading boxes from the truck. Now, well, I'm still doing that, just with a bit more grey in my hair." They both chuckled. Then Nathan took the chance to ask a few questions about the products and was surprised when Hank not only answered clearly, but also gave thoughtful, practical suggestions. "If you use knives often, go with this one. The handle has a rubber grip, easier on the hands over time. This rack's a bit pricey now, but I've seen it go on sale at the end of the month, worth waiting if it's not urgent." It was the kind of advice no training manual could teach. It could only come from someone who truly cared. Nathan paused, rested a hand on the shelf, and looked Hank in the eyes. "You've still got love for the job after all these years?" Hank nodded, his eyes quietly sincere. "I don't love every part of it, but I love making customers feel at ease. I love when an older lady smiles because she found what she needed. I love the moment I can help someone, even if it's just with a simple sentence." Then his gaze shifted around, his voice lowering. "Just a shame. Lately there are a lot of new hires. They don't really care. Maybe because no one tells them anymore that what they do matters." Nathan felt a lump rise in his throat. He hadn't realized that in the middle of his vast chain of stores buried beneath countless data points, there was still someone like Hank. Someone who still believed that serving customers wasn't just a job, but a responsibility, a source of pride. Hank bent down, neatly returning a few misplaced items to their proper spots, then stood back up, no matter what. "I keep trying, every day, even if it's just a little, because if I don't do it, then who will?" Nathan gripped the handle of his shopping basket gently and walked away in silence. But inside him, something had been reignited, an old belief that this company could still be something good, if people like Hank weren't forgotten. The next morning, Nathan returned to corporate headquarters with a heavy but sharper mind than ever. On the 35th floor, the LED lights still illuminated charts and dashboards across large screens. Strategy meetings continued on schedule, but this time he didn't start his day reviewing KPIs or financial forecasts. Instead, he personally logged into the internal system, the one that stored employee records, customer complaints, and training notes across the entire store network. Nathan typed into the search bar, store number 042, Denver. The results appeared within seconds and chilled him to the bone. In just the past 6 months, there had been over 27 negative customer reports about the service at that branch. Of those, 12 complaints directly mentioned one name, Kyle Brennan. Nathan read them one by one. Customer service staff was cold and unhelpful to elderly patrons. Exchange denied with no clear explanation. Employee named Kyle appeared irritated when I asked about a product. Not a single complaint had been properly addressed. Each one was marked, viewed, and ignored. He then moved to the internal performance reviews, the section that listed promotion recommendations and employee commendations. There, Nathan found Hank Morrison's file. That man, honest, patient, dedicated, had been nominated 3 times by store managers for a promotion to team lead. The reason for rejection: budget constraints, lack of relevant certifications, awaiting next evaluation cycle. Yet during the same period, another employee, younger, less experienced, with fewer customer reviews, had been promoted to assistant manager for quick tech adaptation and schedule flexibility. Nathan leaned back in his chair. Suddenly, everything went quiet. It wasn't that the system had no problems. It was that the very optimization policies they once praised were pushing out the most loyal, dedicated people. He silently scrolled down Hank's profile and paused at the final line in the self-evaluation section. "I just hope for a chance to do more for the store, even if it's just a small promotion." No exclamation mark, no complaints, just a quiet wish, as humble as the man himself. Nathan clenched his fist. Something inside him began to stir, not doubt anymore, but resolve. This system needs fixing, not with PowerPoint slides, but with trust restored one person at a time. And he knew this couldn't be solved by email. It couldn't be another restructure. He would have to go back, meet people, in person, in his own name. 1 week after his undercover visit, Hearth and Hallow store number 042 in Denver welcomed a very different kind of guest, this time not wearing an old jacket or a baseball cap. Nathan Hale walked in, dressed in his usual navy blue suit, but his eyes were different. No longer the eyes of someone observing, but of someone who had seen enough and was ready to face it. An employee meeting was announced that same morning. No notice, no protocol, just one simple line. All staff of store number 042 report to the back meeting room at 9:00 a.m. CEO will be present. In the small room behind the checkout counter, the atmosphere was tense. The store manager looked uneasy. A few employees whispered guesses, and Kyle, the customer service rep, sat hunched at the end of the table, face blank, eyes fixed on the floor like he wished he could vanish. The door opened. Nathan walked in. He didn't need a long introduction. He simply looked around the room, nodded, and began with a sentence so quiet yet heavy as stone. "I was here last week. No one knew who I was, and I saw a lot." The room fell dead silent. One staff member swallowed hard. Kyle flinched slightly. Nathan placed his hand on the table, his gaze firm but not angry. "I built Hearth and Hallow from a single small store. Every shelf, every price tag, every thank you was created for one purpose, because we respect people." He looked around the room and continued, "I know the company's gotten bigger. I know the pressure is heavier. But nothing can justify indifference, coldness, or treating customers like a burden." Then he turned and looked directly at Kyle without flinching. "You've hurt a lot of customers. I read every complaint. I was also the man you told to scan the price tag. In aisle 5. No one in the room dared breathe. Kyle opened his mouth, about to say something, but Nathan raised his hand gently to stop him. "I'm not here to fire anyone. I'm here to wake us up. Because if we keep going like this, We won't be Hearth and Hallow anymore. We'll just be another soulless store like any other." The tension in the room softened. A few employees lowered their heads. The manager sighed, his eyes weighed down by fatigue. Then Nathan turned to Hank, sitting quietly near the corner of the table. As always, never demanding, never pushing. Hank Morrison, 12 years here, taking the hardest shifts, training every new hire, always putting the customer first, yet passed over for promotion because he didn't have the right certification. A deep breath echoed through the room. Hank froze, eyes wide. "Hank, starting today, you'll be the assistant store manager, not out of pity, but because you've earned it, long ago." The silence turned into applause. Then it erupted. A young female employee burst into tears. The manager stood up and walked over to shake Hank's hand, and Hank could only nod, eyes glistening as he whispered, "I thought they'd forgotten me." Nathan said nothing more. He looked at each person in the room and concluded, "And you, Kyle, I'm not firing you, but I am having Hank retrain you from the beginning. This is your last chance. If you want to start over, I'm here. If not, the door's over there." And with that, he walked out of the room, not waiting for anyone to say thank you, because to him, today wasn't a day for gratitude. It was a day for making things right. The meeting ended, and people slowly dispersed, carrying a swirl of emotions. Some whispered to one another. Others looked as though they had just awoken from a long sleep. But two people remained in that small back room behind the register, Nathan and Kyle. The young man stood by the window, back turned, hands in his pockets, no longer bearing the arrogance or detachment he had worn before. All that remained was a hollow silhouette. Nathan approached, stood beside him, and said nothing for a few moments. Then he spoke slowly, not sternly, almost as if speaking to himself. "I know. You didn't mean to hurt anyone." Kyle shifted, then whispered, "I didn't think you were the guy from last week. I didn't think I'd see what I saw either, but it made it impossible to stay silent." The two of them looked out the glass pane where Hank stood talking to a couple of new employees, still pointing to the shelves, smiling kindly, like nothing had ever happened. Nathan continued, "You know, when I was your age, a customer once threw a water bottle at me because I mispriced an item, but the manager didn't scold me. He walked over, put a hand on my shoulder, and said, 'Customers may forget what they bought, but they won't forget how we made them feel.'" Kyle turned around, eyes reddened. "I don't know how to be better. No one showed me. On my first day, the manager just said, 'Don't mess things up.' I didn't think I could be anything more." Nathan gave a soft nod. "No anger, no blame. You're right. That's my fault. For letting people like Hank be forgotten, and for letting people like you drift, with no one pulling you back." He looked Kyle straight in the eye, not with the gaze of a CEO, but like a father who had once walked through his own mistakes. "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to truly want to do what's right." Kyle bit his lip, fighting back tears. "I want to. I just don't know where to begin." Nathan placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice low. "Start with the first apology. The first time you really listen. And with the person standing in front of me, if you're brave enough. A pause passed between them. Then Kyle nodded. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. Just a quiet nod from someone who, for the first time, felt truly seen. When they both stepped out of the meeting room, Hank was standing near the counter, waiting. Kyle approached him, bowed his head slightly. "Mr. Hank, I want to learn from the beginning, if you're willing to teach me." Hank smiled, as if he'd been waiting for those words for a long time. "I don't teach through lectures. I teach by working alongside you. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., meet me in the stockroom." Kyle nodded, and Nathan, he turned away, just enough to hide the quiet smile and the faint sting in his eyes. Because sometimes a conversation isn't about winning or losing. It's about truly seeing each other again for the human being who was once hidden beneath the surface. The next morning, before sunlight could reach the first shelf of store number 042, Kyle Brennan had arrived. Not with the slouched posture of a tired young man like before, but in a neatly pressed uniform, hair combed, and a small notebook tucked in his shirt pocket. 600 a.m. sharp. Hank Morrison stepped into the stockroom. He saw Kyle and didn't say "good job," nor did he beam with praise. He simply nodded and handed him a pair of gloves. "We're starting with organizing inventory. No one can serve customers well if they don't know what people need or where to find it." All morning, Kyle followed Hank from shelf to shelf, learning how to categorize products, understanding the meaning behind every label, every code. But more importantly, he learned to listen to the small things. Place this item at eye level for older customers. Keep bottled water near the snack aisle. People tend to get thirsty after shopping for dry goods. When someone asks a question, don't just walk with them if you can. These lessons weren't written in any training manual, but they lived in the heart of someone who had always put the customer before himself, like Hank. Nathan received daily updates not from the store manager, but directly from Hank through short, simple emails. Day 1. Kyle listened the whole morning. No complaints. Day 3. Rearranged the nightlight section without being told. Day 7. Helped a customer find supplies for her elderly mother with Alzheimer's, asked follow-up questions to give better advice. I didn't have to step in. Day 10. I'm starting to understand why you love this job, he told me. Nathan read in silence, but his heart felt lighter. Kyle didn't become a new person overnight, but day by day, step by step, he was becoming the best version of himself because someone believed he deserved the chance to make it right. Then one day, Hank unexpectedly requested a private call with Nathan through the internal line. "Sir, I have a reverse proposal. I'm listening." "Hank, Kyle, I think he should try mentoring new hires during a weekend shift, not with full authority, just as support. But I want to see if he can become what I once was, a person who stayed from the beginning." Nathan smiled, not because of the proposal, but because of the way Hank phrased it. What I once was. Because now, Hank knew he wasn't alone anymore. The following week, Kyle was assigned to mentor 2 new employees, not to manage them, but to pass along a spark. And when Nathan returned to visit the store this time, not in disguise, he saw a young boy asking for help choosing a birthday gift for his mum. Kyle knelt down, offering a genuine smile. "What color do you think your mum would like? We've got these little lavender-themed sets, super cute." Nathan stood at a distance, not stepping in. He simply whispered to himself. He chose kindness when no one was making him. The encounter with Hank and Kyle's transformation didn't just ease the worries weighing on Nathan's heart. It awakened something bigger. The hurt at store number 042 was only the tip of the iceberg. How many other Hanks were being overlooked in other stores? How many other Kyles were lost within a system they were hired into but never truly guided through? Nathan returned to headquarters not to review data this time, but to rewrite how the company operated. He called for a high-level meeting with all regional directors, HR leads, and training department heads. At the start of the session, he didn't present a PowerPoint. He didn't talk about profits. He simply played a short video clip from store number 042's internal camera footage of Hank bending down to help an elderly customer choose a non-stick pan. Then, stepping aside with a gentle line, "Take your time, ma'am. I can wait." When the video ended, Nathan looked around the room and asked, how many people like Hank are quietly wearing down, and how many people like Kyle have never been taught how to be kind? A long silence followed, but no one objected, because everyone knew the system had to change. And change began that very day, nationwide anonymous feedback platform. A new system was rolled out, allowing employees and customers to share feedback directly without going through store management. Heart and Skill Training Program. A new curriculum launched, not just teaching sales techniques, but also how to understand customers, communicate with empathy, and remain patient under pressure. Silent Guardian Fund. A dedicated fund established for frontline employees like Hank, those who may not be flashy, but uphold the company's core values through their daily actions. Listen on the Ground initiative. Each quarter, executive leadership would be required to work at least one full day in a randomly selected store, not as supervisors, but as listeners. Promotion based on real-world value. Promotion criteria were redefined, no longer solely based on certifications or managerial aptitude, but also on direct feedback from customers and co-workers. 3 months later, when an internal survey was sent out to over 300 branches, positive feedback had doubled. But what moved Nathan the most wasn't the data. It was a handwritten letter sent from store number 186 in Idaho, from an employee named Maria, a single mother, for the first time in 6 years. "I feel seen, not just as the person who cleans the floors, but as an important part of this place. Thank you for starting over right where it was needed most." Nathan placed the letter inside a wooden frame and hung it beside his desk, not to show off, but to remind himself that leadership doesn't begin with strategy, it begins with humanity. Because a truly strong company isn't where people run the fastest, but where the slowest are never left behind. 6 months had passed since the sweeping reforms at Hearth and Hallow. There were no news broadcasts covering it, no viral hashtags, but in each small store, from downtown hubs to remote suburban branches, something was shifting. At store Mum042, the one that had once symbolized everything broken, customers no longer met cold stares, but warm nods and quick footsteps rushing to help. At the customer service desk, Kyle Brennan, the young man once labeled the worst employee, was now being called by name by customers. One day, an elderly man came in, panicked after misplacing his prescription, needing a pressure cooker suitable for a strict dietary plan. Kyle not only found the item, but called the man's granddaughter to confirm the model. When the old man, teary-eyed, said, "It's been a long time since anyone's shown me this kind of patience," Kyle simply bowed his head. "I learned it from someone special. He's in the back room." Hank, now the official assistant manager, still arrived 30 minutes early each shift to check the hidden corners of the stockroom, but he didn't work alone anymore. Kyle often came with him, and sometimes the two of them would just stand by the shelves, watching new employees joke and laugh, before Hank would say, "We don't really need anything big, do we? Just for this place to still have kindness." Across the company, results were becoming more visible. Customer complaints dropped by 42%. Positive employee feedback nearly doubled, and for the first time in 3 years, the number of staff staying with the company for over 5 years had begun to rise. But what made Nathan feel that the change was truly profound was that the company's culture was being rewritten not by corporate memos, but by the people on the front lines. A young employee named Lila at the New Jersey branch proposed a listening corner where each week a staff member would share the most moving customer story they had experienced. A store manager in Texas hand-wrote letters to every former employee who had quit under pressure, inviting them to return and try again in a renewed environment. 2 of them said yes. And at headquarters, Nathan continued his routine of visiting one random store each month, not to inspect, not to film, but to ask one simple question. "Is there anyone around here who feels forgotten lately?" One late afternoon near the year's end, when Kyle was honored as Transformational Employee of the Quarter, he received a small plaque engraved with the words, "Kindness isn't about perfection, it's about the courage to change." He stepped off the stage and walked toward Hank, holding out the plaque. "I think this belongs to you too." Hank shook his head and smiled. "No, that's yours. But if you'd like, we can hang it in the stockroom so anyone who's ever lost their way knows they can start again." Nathan stood watching them from a distance, arms crossed, eyes glistening, because he knew it's not policies or 5-year plans that keep a company standing, it's moments like these. And sometimes it all starts with one step back in the right direction. Some say a great company is built on exceptional strategy and optimized systems. But after this 6-month journey, Nathan Hale had come to understand a truly sustainable company is one where every person, even the smallest, feels heard. He wrote in his personal journal, on the last page of the leather notebook he always carried, "I didn't go undercover to expose anyone. I went to remind myself that I was once invisible, and I must never let anyone feel that way inside my own company. Kyle's transformation was an outcome. Hank's promotion was a well-earned reward. But the greater victory was an entire culture, once fractured, now slowly being restored, piece by piece, through acts of trust and the quiet courage of those who were once overlooked. If you're a leader, step out of the office just once, put down the slide deck, set aside the balance sheet, go to the place where a quiet employee is silently holding it all together while feeling overlooked. Sit beside them, not to inspect, but to understand, not to direct, but to connect, and ask one honest question. Today, is there something that made you feel unseen? You might be surprised, because sometimes a simple nod at the right moment is enough to hold on to a heart that's on the verge of letting go. And if you're just a small employee, someone whose name no one remembers, whose work no one thanks, please believe this. You are not invisible. You are not alone. And what you're doing, it matters, even if no one applauds. Maybe today you're just restocking a shelf, mopping the floor, answering the same question for the 5th time. But somewhere out there, someone like Nathan is watching and learning how to be human again. From you. Because in the end, a system can survive on rules, but only people can make it come alive. And if you ask, can one ordinary person change an entire organization? Then remember, a stockroom worker named Hank did. A once indifferent kid named Kyle did too. And so can you, starting with kindness. Sometimes, the only thing needed to begin a transformation isn't a meeting. It's one honest look between two people. Don't wait to be seen. See someone else first. Because change doesn't always start from the top down. It often begins with one heart that refuses to look away.